So this text, the Shiva Samhita, it's believed to have been composed between 1300 and 1500 CE.
Oh.
Probably around Varanasi in India.
Okay.
It's considered a root text of Hatha Yoga and offers a unique collection of teachings that you won't really find in other places.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about the Shiva Samhita is that it's structured as this dialogue between Shiva, the Hindu god, and his consort, Parvati.
Oh, wow.
So you're really kind of eavesdropping on this divine conversation about Hatha Yoga.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And they cover a lot of ground.
They do.
There's asanas, the physical postures. There's pranayama, which focuses on breath control.
Right.
But then it goes even deeper and talks about these things called mudras.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of those before?
I mean, I imagine your listeners have probably heard mudras in the context of yoga.
Sure.
But the Shiva Samhita really dives deep into their significance.
Okay.
There's specific hand gestures and energetic seals that are believed to influence the flow of energy within the body.
Okay.
So they're really tools to manipulate your subtle body, which is a concept we can unpack a bit later.
Yes, definitely. Now, the Shiva Samhita also emphasizes this awakening of Kundalini energy,
Right.
which is a powerful force that is said to lie dormant at the base of the spine.
Yes.
I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so Kundalini is this central concept in Hatha Yoga.
Okay.
It's often described as this coiled serpent at the base of the spine.
Oh, wow.
Representing this really potent source of dormant energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hatha Yoga, as described in the Shiva Samhita, is really aiming to awaken this Kundalini energy and guide it upwards through the body's energy channels,
I see.
ultimately leading to profound transformation.
So it's not just about stretching and breathing.
No.
It's about harnessing this powerful internal energy.
That's right.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
But how do these mudras actually work to achieve this awakening?
So mudras are thought to create specific energetic circuits within the body. And by practicing them with precision and focus, yogis believe they can direct that flow of Kundalini energy.
Right.
The Shiva Samhita describes a whole range of different mudras, each with its own specific purpose and effect.
So, for example, it mentions Kachari Mudra,
Right.
which involves manipulating the tongue to access this nectar that supposedly grants longevity.
Oh.
And then there's Vajroli Mudra, which is all about controlling sexual energy.
Interesting.
Some pretty intense stuff.
Yes, and that's why it's so important to approach these practices with caution
Okay.
and really with the guidance of a qualified teacher.
Sure.
The text itself warns against improper practice.
Right.
And it highlights the potential dangers of working with such potent energies.
That's good advice. Now, speaking of powerful practices, the book mentions this triad of mudras, Mahamudra, Mahabandha, and Mahaveda,
Right.
that are said to allow one to conquer death within 6 months if practiced regularly.
Wow.
That really caught my attention.
It's a striking statement.
It is.
But it's really important to remember that the Shiva Samhita,
Okay.
like many ancient yogic texts,
Yeah.
often uses symbolic language. So conquering death in this context doesn't necessarily mean achieving physical immortality.
Oh, okay.
It refers to transcending the limitations of the ego,
Okay.
achieving a state of liberation from this cycle of birth and death,
Gotcha.
which is really the ultimate goal of yoga,
I see.
as described in the text.
So it's more about overcoming limitations and achieving spiritual liberation than literally living forever.
That's right.
That makes a lot more sense. I'm wondering, as someone who has studied this text in depth,
Sure.
what do you think about this concept of liberation?
Well, it's a really profound concept that lies at the heart of yogic philosophy. It speaks to the idea that our true nature is not bound by the limitations of the physical body or the ego. It's about recognizing a deeper, more expansive sense of self.
That's really interesting. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something else that struck me about the Shiva Samhita,
Yeah.
the historical context.
Absolutely. From an academic perspective,
Okay.
it's believed that the Shiva Samhita might represent an attempt by Orthodox Shiva Hindus
Okay.
to incorporate Hatha Yoga, which was originally associated with unorthodox Nath yogis,
Interesting.
into their own tradition.
So it's like this text could be a bridge between these different yogic lineages,
Exactly.
bringing together practices that were once considered quite separate.
That's right. And that's one of the things that makes the Shiva Samhita so valuable. It gives us this window into the rich and complex history of yoga, highlighting its diversity and adaptability.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about how these practices, once perhaps shrouded in secrecy, eventually found their way into this more mainstream tradition.
Definitely. It really shows you how ideas and practices evolve over time.
It does.
Now, let's dive into some of the specifics the Shiva Samhita outlines.
Yeah.
We briefly talked about pranayama before.
Right.
But the book goes into a lot more detail about these different techniques for breath control. And I'm wondering if you could maybe shed some light on what prana actually is and how it relates to these breathing exercises.
Yeah, you're right. We kind of jumped ahead a bit there with that term.
Yeah.
Prana is often translated as like life force or vital energy.
Okay.
And it's this subtle energy that yogis believe flows through the body, animating us, keeping us alive.
Okay.
And pranayama literally means control of prana.
I see.
So it really aims to regulate and harness this energy through these specific breathing techniques.
So it's not just about getting more oxygen into the body. It's about working with this deeper energetic level.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. So the Shiva Samhita emphasizes this natural rhythmic breath and focusing on balancing the flow of prana rather than holding your breath for extended periods.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's about finding that smooth flow rather than forcing anything.
Right.
Now, the book also mentions 4 specific asanas: Siddhasana, Padmasana, Ugrasana, and Svastikasana.
Yeah.
Do any of those stand out to you as particularly important or interesting?
Well, Siddhasana and Padmasana are both seated postures,
Okay.
known for their stability and their ability to promote deep meditation. Ugrasana, which translates to fierce pose, sounds intriguing, although the exact form is not super clear from the text.
Okay.
It seems to involve a deep back bend,
Wow.
which would definitely live up to the name.
Right. And then we have Svastikasana, another comfortable seated posture,
Right.
often used for pranayama practice.
Exactly.
So it sounds like these asanas are all about establishing a solid foundation, both physically and energetically, for these deeper practices like meditation and pranayama. It's like setting the stage for inner exploration.
Precisely. They're not just about flexibility or physical prowess.
Right.
They're really about preparing the body and mind for higher states of consciousness.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask about something that really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
The practice of shadow gazing that's described in the book.
Okay.
It sounds so mysterious.
It does.
Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. Shadow gazing, also known as Chaya Upasana in Sanskrit,
Wow.
is this unique technique where you fix your gaze on your own shadow,
Okay.
particularly at dusk or dawn,
Interesting.
when the shadows are more elongated and less distinct.
Oh, wow.
It's a contemplative practice
Okay.
that is said to cultivate detachment and dissolve the ego, allowing you to connect with a deeper sense of self.
So you're literally confronting your own shadow self.
Exactly.
What a powerful metaphor.
It is. It's about acknowledging and integrating these hidden aspects of ourselves.
Yeah.
The parts we might normally try to avoid or deny.
Okay. That's a really profound idea.
Yeah.
And it ties in so beautifully with the text's overall emphasis on self-realization and liberation.
It does.
Now, I know we've been focusing on the practical techniques.
Right.
But I'm also really intrigued by the philosophical ideas presented in the Shiva Samhita. It seems to draw heavily on non-dualistic Vedantic philosophy.
It does.
Can you explain what that means for someone who might not be familiar with those terms?
Of course. Vedanta is one of the 6 major schools of Hindu philosophy.
Okay.
And non-dualistic Vedanta in particular emphasizes the unity of all things.
Yeah.
It proposes that the ultimate reality, Brahman,
Okay.
is formless and all-encompassing, and that our individual selves, or Atman, are essentially not separate from this universal consciousness.
So instead of seeing ourselves as these like separate individuals,
Right.
this philosophy suggests that we're all part of this larger interconnected web of existence.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
And the Shiva Samhita echoes this perspective. It really highlights the illusory nature of the separate self, and it suggests that through these practices of Hatha Yoga, we can transcend this illusion and realize our inherent oneness with the divine.
That's a really powerful concept, and it makes me think about the role of the guru.
Yes.
Or spiritual guide, which is also mentioned in the book.
Right.
Do you think that's still relevant in modern yoga practice?
Absolutely. The role of the guru has always been to provide guidance, support accountability on the spiritual path. It's about finding someone who resonates with you.
Yeah.
Who can inspire and challenge you to grow.
So it's less about blind obedience.
Right.
And more about seeking wisdom from someone who's walked the path before you.
Precisely. And that could be a yoga teacher, a
Right.
spiritual mentor, a therapist, even a wise friend.
Sure.
Anyone who really embodies those qualities of wisdom and compassion
Okay.
that can help us navigate this journey of self-discovery.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to come back to something we touched upon earlier.
Yeah.
The idea that the Shiva Samhita might be this bridge between different yogic traditions, it seems like there's a real message of inclusivity there.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a valuable message for us today,
Okay.
especially in a world that can feel so divided at times.
Right.
The Shiva Samhita reminds us that there are many paths to the same summit,
Yeah.
and that we can learn from and respect the diversity of approaches.
It's like that saying, there are many rivers that flow to the ocean.
Exactly.
Each path has its own unique beauty and challenges,
Mm.
but ultimately they're all leading towards the same goal.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of yoga. It's
Yeah.
a path of self-discovery,
Yeah.
a journey of uncovering your own truth and living in alignment with it. The Shiva Samhita, with its rich tapestry of practices and philosophies,
Right.
offers a wonderful guide for anyone seeking to embark on that journey.
I couldn't agree more. Well, on that note, let's take a moment to gather our thoughts before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore how these ancient teachings might offer guidance and inspiration for navigating the complexities of modern life. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Shiva Samhita. It's been so fascinating exploring this ancient text and all of its wisdom.
It really has. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, from mudras and kundalini to shadow gazing and non-dualistic philosophy.
It's a lot.
And I think what's striking me now is how relevant these ancient teachings can be to our modern lives.
Right.
Even though most of us aren't aspiring yogis living in caves.
That's such a good point. While the context might be different, the underlying principles of cultivating awareness, harnessing energy, and connecting with that deeper self,
Yeah.
those are timeless and universally applicable.
So it's about finding ways to integrate those principles into our daily routines and challenges.
Yeah.
Even if we're not, mastering all the complex techniques described in the text.
Exactly. For example, the Shiva Samhita talks about the importance of a calm and steady mind. In today's world, with all its distractions and pressures, that's easier said than done. But the text offers practical tools like pranayama to help us cultivate that inner stillness.
It's so true. It's like those ancient yogis were dealing with their own versions of information overload and stress. Maybe they were onto something with these techniques.
Perhaps they were.
Yeah.
Even just a few minutes of focused breathing can have a profound impact on our mental and emotional state. And that's something we can all incorporate into our lives, regardless of our yoga experience.
Absolutely. And what about the concept of kundalini? How can we relate that to, our everyday goals and aspirations?
Well, remember, Kundalini is about awakening this potent energy that can transform consciousness.
Right.
You can think of it as tapping into your full potential.
Okay.
Your creative energy, your inner drive.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about having mystical experiences, but about unleashing this powerful force within you that can really propel you forward in life.
So instead of viewing it as this esoteric concept,
Right.
we can see it as a source of inspiration and motivation for achieving our goals.
Exactly.
Whether that's in our careers, relationships, or personal growth.
It's about living with greater passion, purpose, and vitality.
I like that.
And the practices of Hatha Yoga, the asanas, the mudras, they can all help cultivate and channel that energy.
Okay, so it's like giving ourselves an internal power boost.
Yes.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on something we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The idea of the Shiva Samhita as a bridge between different yogic traditions.
Right.
It seems to suggest that there's not just one right way to practice or experience yoga.
Yes, and I think that's a powerful message for us today.
Yeah.
It encourages us to approach yoga with an open mind and a willingness to explore different paths.
Right.
There's a beautiful diversity within the yogic tradition, and each individual can find what resonates with them.
So instead of getting caught up in dogma or rigid rules, it's about finding what works for you and honoring the unique journey of each practitioner.
Precisely. It's about embracing the richness and complexity of the yogic tradition and recognizing that it's a living, evolving tapestry of wisdom and practices.
Well said. So after this deep dive into the Shiva Samhita, what are your final takeaways? What's the nugget of wisdom you're carrying with you?
I'm really struck by the text's emphasis on self-transformation as an ongoing process.
Yeah,
It's not about reaching some final destination, but about continually cultivating awareness and making conscious choices in each moment.
I love that.
Huh.
It's a reminder that we always have the opportunity to grow and evolve, both on and off the mat.
Exactly. And the Shiva Samhita, with its rich blend of practical techniques and profound philosophy, offers a wealth of guidance for anyone seeking to embark on that journey of self-discovery.
Well said. So to all of you listening, we hope this deep dive into the Shiva Samhita has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to explore these ancient teachings. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep diving deep.